Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Connor had always believed he knew his wife better than anyone else in the world. 7 years of marriage had forged between them a comfortable, almost predictable rhythm, and he liked that. He liked the mornings, waking up next to Bethany, the steam from his coffee curling in the sunlight as she scrolled through the news on her tablet. He liked returning home to find her cooking dinner, humming along to a TV show, or sprawled on the couch with a sketchpad in hand. At 33, Connor had carved out a steady career as an architect in Oregon and felt confident he had found the perfect partner to share his life. Bethany, 31, worked part-time as a freelance graphic designer, her schedule flexible, as she always reminded him, so I can care for the house and myself. Connor had never questioned her freedom. Trust, he liked to think, was the foundation of everything. Or at least that's what he kept repeating to himself. That Tuesday in October, Connor was driving through the Oak Ridge neighborhood, a quiet stretch of streets about 20 minutes from their home. He had a meeting scheduled with a potential client, a renovation project on a century-old Victorian house that made his mind buzz with possibilities. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the maple trees lining the sidewalks, making Portland look almost magical in its autumn splendor. Turning onto Maple Street, searching for the client's address, something across the road caught his eye. A woman was stepping out of a pale blue, two-story house, adjusting the collar of her black coat with small, nervous movements. Her gaze darted around the street, rapid, almost furtive. Connor froze. Even before his brain fully registered it, his heart began pounding. It was Bethany. Not with excitement, not with joy, but with something far heavier, darker, panic, confusion, a creeping sense of betrayal. That house wasn't connected to any friend, any relative, any acquaintance he knew. Bethany had never mentioned Oak Ridge. She was supposed to be home, working on a tight deadline for a design project. At least that's what she had said that morning over breakfast. Connor's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched her climb into a silver Honda Civic and drive off in the opposite direction. For a moment, he considered following her, but an even stronger, more urgent need pulled him the other way. He needed to know where she had just come from. He parked a few meters ahead, stepped out, and approached the pale blue house. It was ordinary enough, well kept, with a small front garden and a wooden porch. Nothing about it suggested drama or deception. Yet his stomach twisted as he climbed the 3 steps to the front door and rang the bell, each chime echoing like a warning. When the door opened, the face that greeted him made his chest tighten. Josh Brennan, Bethany's ex-fiancé. Connor knew him only from old photos and the occasional story Bethany had shared about her past. Josh had been in her life nearly a decade earlier, engaged briefly before she met Connor. The engagement had ended abruptly, and Bethany had always been vague about why, insisting only that they weren't compatible. Connor had never pushed her for details. Everyone had a past, but now, standing face to face with the tall man with brown hair and uncertain eyes, Connor felt something else stirring inside him. Anger, betrayal, humiliation. A sharp, cold knot of something he couldn't yet name. The quiet porch, the ordinary house, even the autumn sun felt suddenly distant. All that remained was the tense, charged air between him and the man who had once been part of the woman he thought he knew better than anyone. Josh opened his mouth to speak, but Connor tried to speak too, and nothing came out. Shock overpowered rage. He simply raised his hand, unable to form any words, turned and walked back down steps. He closed his car door with controlled force and drove home on a top-lot, his mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts at once. What exactly had Bethany been doing there? How long had this been going on? How could he have been so blind? When Connor walked into the house, Bethany was in the living room sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand. She looked up at him and Connor knew right away. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly. Josh must have called her. Of course, he had. Connor shut the door behind him and just stood there waiting. Bethany stood up, letting her phone fall onto the couch. Connor, her voice broke. Tears started streaming down her face. I can explain. Can you? Connor's voice came out colder than he'd expected, because I'd really like to hear the explanation for why you were leaving your ex-fiancé's house in the middle of the afternoon," Bethany sobbed, bringing her hands to her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Connor. I didn't want it to happen like this. I was trying to tone things with him. I swear." "And things." The word burned in Connor's throat. "So, how long has this been going on, Bethany?" "Weeks, months, 3 months," she whispered, barely able to look at him. "It started in July. We ran into each other at a coffee shop, and he'd moved back to Portland. Wet-ocked. It was innocent at first. I swear it was. But then you thought you could hide this from me forever." Connor's voice was colder than he'd intended. 7 years. Bethany. 7 years together, and you throw it all away for an ex who wasn't even impotent enough for you to move forward with back then. Bethany shook her head, tears falling faster. "It wasn't like that. I was confused. Josh reminded me of who I used to be before all the responsibilities, before I started feeling trapped." "Trapped?" Connor took a step forward, fists clenched at his sides. "I trapped you? Me? The one who always gave you the freedom to work from home, to set your own hours, to do whatever you wanted." "It's not about you, Connor," Bethany shouted back, frustrated. "It's about me. About how I feel. You'd never understand." Connor took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Every word Bethany said felt like a blade cutting something inside him that would never fully heal. He looked around the living room. The house they'd chosen together. The furniture they'd bought piece by piece. The photos on the walls showing smiles that now seemed fake. Everything felt tainted. "I need you to leave tonight," Connor finally said, his voice returning to that cold, controlled tone. "I can't stay under the same roof like this. Go to a hotel, to a friend's place, anywhere you want. But I can't be near you right now." Bethany went pale. "Connor, no. Please. We can talk this through. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I love you. I still love you. I was going to say you had an hour, Bethany," Connor murmured, his voice aching with disbelief. "But right now, I can't even think straight." "I can't," Bethany yelled, desperate. Connor stopped, his hand on the doorknob. "I can't just leave like this. I'm pregnant, Connor." The silence that followed was deafening. Connor slowly turned, staring at the woman who had been his wife, his partner, his supposed soulmate. "What? I'm pregnant?" Bethany repeated, calmer now, wiping the tears from her face. "I found out 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how. Not with everything else going on." Connor felt like Thefler had vanished beneath his feet. Pregnant part of him wanted to believe. Wanted this to mean a fresh start. Harrison to fight for their marriage. But rational part of him, still functioning, asked the question that needed asking. "Is the baby mine?" Bethany looked at him offended. "How can you ask me that?" "Of course. It ours, Connor. We were still together. It's your baby." Connor slowly shook his head. "You just told me you've been cheating on me for 3 months. So, excuse me if I don't take your word as absolute truth right now." "I'm not lying about this," Bethany insisted, stepping toward him. "Connor, please. We can make this work for our child, for us." Connor pulled away when she tried to touch his arm. "No," he said firmly. "Don't touch me. And if you really are pregnant, then we'll do a paternity test. Until then," he took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Until then, I need to leave. Even if you're pregnant, I can't process all of this right now. You can stay in the house temporarily, but I can't." Connor went upstairs to their bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started throwing clothes inside without care. Bethany followed, trying to argue, begging him to stay, but he ignored her. Every word she spoke now sounded false, every promise empty. He collected important documents, his laptop, and a few essentials before leaving. He paused in the doorway and looked at Bethany one last time. "The house is only in my name," he said calmly. "It's my parents' inheritance. You never contributed financially to the property, and you were never added to it. Legally, it's mine, but I won't throw you out right now. Stay until we get the test results. If you need to go to essential medical appointments, let me know and I'll cover your transportation. But once we know the truth, everything changes." He paused. You destroyed everything, Bethany. I hope it was worth it. Connor spent the following weeks in a small rented apartment, going to work mechanically and spending nights researching non-invasive prenatal paternity tests. He learned that in Oregon, after 8 weeks of pregnancy, it was possible to perform a test that collected fetal DNA from the mother's blood. He contacted a lawyer who advised him on the legal steps to take. Bethany initially resisted, but the lawyer made it clear that Connor had the right to request the test before assuming any financial or emotional responsibility for the child. The waiting was torture. Connor tried to stay busy, taking on more work projects, avoiding friends who asked about Bethany. He didn't tell anyone what was going on. The shame was too great, deep and too personal. He trusted her completely, and that trust had been shattered in the cruelest way possible on lonely nights. Connor found himself wondering how things might have been different if he just kept driving that day, if he'd never seen Bethany leaving that house. But then he'd shake his head. Not knowing wouldn't have changed reality, only prolonged the lie. When Bethany reached 10 weeks of pregnancy, they scheduled the test. It was a clinical, detached experience. Nothing like what Connor had ever imagined being part of a pregnancy would feel like. They barely spoke at the lab. Bethany looked smaller, paler, with deep dark circles under her eyes. She tried to talk a few times, but Connor kept his distance. Her words meant nothing to him anymore. The results took a week to arrive. Connor was at the office when his lawyer called. Connor, the test results are in. I'm emailing you the full report now, but I need to give you an important piece of information first. Are you sitting down? Connor's heart pounded. I am. Go ahead. The report is conclusive. You are not the biological father. The probability of paternity is I'm sorry, Connor. Connor leaned back in his chair, feeling a strange mix of relief and devastation. Relief because he wouldn't be tied to Bethany for more than 18 years through a child. Devastation because the final confirmation that she'd lied about something so fundamental felt like a punch to the gut. Thanks for letting Mac know, he managed to say. There's one more thing, the lawyer continued. The house is registered solely in your name, correct? Your parents' inheritance? Yes, Connor confirmed. My parents left me the house when they passed away 5 years ago. Bethany was never added to the deed. Good. That means you have every legal right to ask her to vacate the property. I can prepare the official notice. In Oregon, she'll have 30 days to move out. Connor closed his eyes. Do it. The sooner the better. That night, Connor called Bethany. She answered on the second ring, her voice heavy with anxiety. Connor, did you get the results? I did, he replied, keeping his tone neutral. And you know what they say, Bethany? I'm not the father. The silence on the other end was long. Finally, Bethany sobbed. Connor, I really thought it was yours. I wasn't lying on purpose. You weren't. Connor let sarcasm color his words. You are involved with 2 men at the same time, Bethany. Those are the consequences. That's cruel, she whispered. Cruel. Connor felt anger rising again. You want to talk about cruelty? You cheated on me for 3 months. You lied every single day, looked me in the eyes, and pretended everything was fine. You made me question my own sanity when I sensed something was off. And now you want to talk about cruelty. I know I made mistakes. Bethany started, but Connor cut her off. You'll receive an official notice in the next few days. You have 30 days to leave the house. It's mine by inheritance and you have no legal claim to it. Use that time to find a place and pack your things. Connor, I didn't have enough money to Bethany tried to protest. Then I suggest you call Josh. Connor interrupted coldly. After all, the baby is his. Maybe he'll want to take responsibility. He hung up before she could respond. In the days that followed, Connor learned through mutual acquaintances that Bethany had contacted Josh about pregnancy. His reaction was exactly what Connor had expected and secretly hoped to hear. Josh panicked. According to what Connor heard, Josh initially didn't need any responsibility, claiming Bethany couldn't prove anything. When she mentioned the paternity test and the possibility of legal action for child support, Josh simply disappeared, literally. He abandoned his job. the month-to-month rental house in Oakage with no long-term lease commitment, and moved to Nevada without forwarding his address. Bethany tried to track him down, but Josh had cut all ties. He blocked her number, deactivated his social media accounts, and vanished completely. Theman she'd chosen over her husband, Theon, who supposedly made her feel free and alive again, had fled at the first sign of real responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on Connor. A month later, Connor was back in the house he'd grown up in. The house his parents had bought with so much effort and love. The house they'd left him with the hope they'd build his own happy family there. Bethany had moved out as ordered, leaving behind only a few pieces of furniture that Connor donated to charity. He didn't want anything that reminded him of her. Every room was cleaned, repainted, renewed. Connor needed to erase the traces of those 7 years and start over from scratch. He learned through a former co-worker of Bethy's that she was now living in a small apartment across town, struggling to pay bills with sporadic freelance work. Her pregnancy was progressing and she was alone. No husband, no child's father, no financial stability she'd enjoyed while married. Some mutual friends had taken sides, but most simply distanced themselves, not wanting to get caught up in the drama. Bethany had lost not just Connor, but support network she'd built over years. Connor felt no pity. He knew his hold. He knew part of him ought to worry about the innocent child on the way, but he couldn't. Yes, the child was innocent, but it had been conceived amid a lie he'd never asked to be part of. Who understood the child bore no blame. Booth also knew it wasn't his responsibility to care for a life born from a deception he never chose to join. Whatever happened from here on out would be the direct consequence of choices Bethany and Josh had made. 6 months after that afternoon in Oakage, Connor was slowly rebuilding his life. The divorce proceedings were underway and would soon be finalized. Bethany had no grounds to contest it. She'd admitted to the affair. The paternity test proved the child wasn't this, and she had no claim to the house. Legally, it was a straightforward case, even if it remained devastating to the heart. Connor started going out more, accepting invitations from friends he'd ignored during those dark months. He wasn't ready for a new relationship, and knew it would take time to trust again. But he was alive. He was breathing. He was moving forward, one step at a time. One Sunday morning, Connor was at the local grocery store buying groceries when he saw her. Bethany was in the baby products aisle, her belly now quite prominent, looking at diaper prices with a tired, defeated expression. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a completely different version of the woman Connor had once known. Bethany looked up just then, and their eyes met. For a second, Connor thought about turning away, leaving quickly before she could say anything. But he didn't. Instead, he held her gaze, saw the regret and shame reflected in those eyes he'd once thought he knew so well. Then, calmly, Connor acknowledged her with a brief nod, a gesture that said, "I see your pain, but it no longer belongs to me," and kept walking. He didn't look back. There was no reason to. Bethany was the past now, a painful lesson about trust and choices. Connor had his house back, his dignity back, and most importantly, the truth. The lie had been exposed, and he was free of it. The price had been high. 7 years of his life invested in something that turned out to be false, but Connor was determined not to let it define his future. He was stronger than he'd imagined, more resilient than he'd hoped. As he loaded his groceries into the car, Connor looked up at Portland's clear sky and took a deep breath. Thepan was still there, probably always will be on some level, but it no longer controlled him. He'd faced betrayal, demanded the truth, and reclaimed what was rightfully his. Bethany would have had to live with the consequences of her actions, just as Josh was clearly running from his. But Connor was finally free to rebuild, free to breathe with it the weight of lies choking every moment. And that he realized was more than he'd ever thought possible on that devastating October afternoon. Life collects debts, Connor thought as he drove back home. Not always quickly, not always in the way we expect, but eventually the choices we make catch up with us. Bethany and Josh were learning that now, each in their own way. And Connor was learning that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't doing anything at all, but simply moving in and letting people deal with their wins they created themselves. He pulled into the driveway, looked at the familiar facade of the house, and smiled. A small but genuine smile. It was a beginning. And for now, that was enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.